Now, our next speaker will be joining us online. So we've got Martin Gisbourne from Genuit Group. Martin has got over 20 years' experience of leading businesses in the construction product sector, and he was appointed Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer of Genuit in April 2023. So hopefully we will be getting Martin online. Brilliant. Welcome.
There I am. Morning, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. So, apologies that myself and my colleague that will follow shortly afterwards, Jason, can't be with you in person today, but hopefully we can take the materials in good order and participate actively in the Q&A later on. So just to start with a quick few words about Genuit. So we're a listed business on the London Stock Exchange. We listed almost 10 years ago. Last year, our revenues were just shy of £600 million. We organise ourselves across 3 business units, which I'll talk more about in a moment. We're across 26 sites, mostly in the UK. So last year of that revenue number, about 88% of that was derived in the UK. Outside of the UK, our next largest market would be the Middle East. And we're just over 3,000 hard-working colleagues. So we're organised into 3 business units or divisions, if you prefer. So Climate Management Solutions is a group of businesses that are involved in the world of heating and ventilation. Trying to look at low-carbon solutions, such as underfloor heating, or indeed ways of cooling as the climate warms up, as we've talked about earlier on. On the right-hand side, Sustainable Building Solutions is a range of construction products where our value proposition is very much to be the lowest carbon supplier of choice for our customers. And I'll talk a bit about that on the coming slides. And then last, but obviously in the context of today, for sure not least, our Water Management Solutions business. So this is particularly concerned with adaptation and resilience in the context of both increasing water and inundations, and what to do with that increased water supply and stress on our infrastructure and drainage systems, but also how we use that water and don't just transport it from A to B in a way that actually allows us to get some value from the rainfall that we can capture. In terms of our view of the world, so this is a snapshot of our strategy, our Sustainable Solutions for Growth strategy that we launched at a capital markets event in Q4 2022. So I won't talk too much around the couple of points at the bottom, which we might kind of regard as our key enabling factors, our people and the way we do things, and also our Genuit Business System, which is kind of the way we try and unlock synergies within our group, particularly a group that's grown significantly through M&A. What I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about are the top 2 subjects and how they intrinsically link to our purpose statement that you see over on the left-hand side of the slide. So together we create sustainable living. So what does that mean to us? So here at Genuit, we, as per my job title, we see the world of strategy, sustainability, and revenue growth has been inextricably linked. And broadly speaking, we might divide that into 2 subject areas. The first one is to do with mitigation. So we are concerned about the impact our operations have on the climate, and so we validated our SBTs over a year ago, one of the first companies in our sector to do that. But more importantly than that, from the context of growth, we see being a low carbon business as actually a source of competitive advantage. And actually increasingly our customers, because of their climate commitments or their shareholder base or their purpose or whatever it might be, actually they are interested in a decarbonised supply chain. So that's in the world of mitigation. In the world of adaptation and resilience, obviously, we will talk more about water in a moment, but here, not just in the world of water, but in the world of our Climate Management Solutions business, we need to react to the fact that our homes and workspaces are getting warmer. So what can we do to cool those down in a sustainable way? And of course, in the winter, what can we do to heat them in a sustainable way? And all the regulatory drivers around things like Part L of the building regs, the transition away from gas boilers, all of those give us opportunities to help adapt and create climate resilience, but in a way that is actually consistent with our sustainability objectives. So those two things, although they're separate in two categories on the slide, actually for us, they're inextricably linked. So turning on to the subject of water and water under pressure. So the general kind of thread of my few slides, and then handing over to Jason in his slides, is that we'll start with a few macro observations and kind of increasingly zoom in to what that means to us as Genuit. So as the previous speaker said, it's well trialed and well documented that over the past few years, the severity and the frequency of extreme rainwater events has increased. And that's what you see on the slide here, right? So the kind of mid-green block on the stat bar chart you see from the turn of the millennium has become increasingly large. And that's the number of events, but also behind that, the severity of those events has increased as well. And as it says in the title at the top of the slide, that's where we end up with this paradox. It's not just that over a year we are seeing more rainfall. In fact, in the round, that's less of an issue and is less of a substantive point. What's happening is that we are increasingly seeing higher concentrations of rainfall. And that, of course, is how we get the paradox here, even in the UK, in a relatively temperate country, that we get the paradox of within the same year, hosepipe bans and floods. In fact, quite often even within the same month. So that's increasingly with us, and that's obviously a trend that we see as something that's going to stay with us in the future. I mentioned the UK and those sorts of issues in a temperate climate, but it's not just a UK issue. Obviously, it addresses beyond these shores and beyond our UK markets, and it also manifests itself in different ways. So over on the left-hand side of this slide, you see the recent events in the Middle East. So obviously somewhat renowned as a dry area of the world, but again, not across the year are they seeing particularly higher levels of rainfall, but these rapid, high-intensity bouts of rainfall are causing immense stress on their water management systems. Excuse me, which were obviously not designed 20, 30 years ago to cater for the events that we see today. So disruption in historically dry countries. In the middle, just what we experience here in the UK, but I thought we'd just draw out not the fact that it's just increased rainwater, right? The problem that we have when we have flooding in the UK, we see those tragic pictures of people with sandbags outside doors and all that sort of stuff. It's not simply that we have too much surface water to deal with. It's that surface water is not in most occasions clean rainwater. For the most part, what we have actually are sewer overflows, and hence we have effluent in our streets and homes and pubs and villages and all that sort of stuff that we see on the news. So the consequence of extra rainfall does not simply create a challenge to manage the rainfall. It also means that we've got to shield other parts of our water management systems so that effluent does not find its way back into the built environment. Now, on the right-hand side, the other part of stress on our water supplies. So again, historically a fairly temperate country, Spain has been in water scarcity now for the last few summers, and that's had severe consequence both on agriculture, although again, actually, as the previous speaker said, not simply on agriculture. The water scarcity issue obviously hits agriculture first, then it hits our homes second, and then it hits our industry third. We'll see a bit about that on the coming slide as well. Maybe just to talk a bit about the way that the climate and its changes are also interacting with some kind of human-related factors, and what we're doing as a society to actually worsen some of these events. So obviously, our impact on the 1.5 degrees is well trodden ground, and we don't need to go over that. But actually, even then, with the fact that we've got warmer skies, which themselves can hold greater quantities of water. Actually, what we then do with our built environment around us is worsening the consequences of what happens subsequently. So there's a few points on this slide that I'll just take a couple of minutes to dwell upon. So the first couple of points relate to the speed of runoff. So, and if we think about this in a somewhat micro context, I think we all have experience either in our own homes or the homes in our street where front gardens have now been paved over, and all of a sudden the rate of runoff from that previously grassed area, now a block paved area, increases, and that's what we see on a much more macro scale. So urbanisation and concretisation, as we would call it, are actually exacerbating the fact that when we get these higher intensity rainwater events, actually it's crashing into our water management infrastructure at a higher rate than would ordinarily have previously been the case. So you see in the four diagrams of the top left one there, you see how a more natural environment helps mitigate that rainwater event. So firstly, it slows down the rate of runoff. Secondly, it also helps to clean the water as the soil beds create a form of natural filtration system, and also the green surfaces themselves actually encourage evapotranspiration, which I think is currently leading the league table in difficult words to say ahead of the hydrological cycle even. So that's what the natural world left to its own devices helps in terms of that mitigation. On the right-hand side is obviously the corollary of that. In a built environment with impervious surfaces, with paved areas, with car parks, all those sorts of things that the built environment has historically led to, all of a sudden you've got none of those benefits, and water is crashing into the drainage system at a rate of knots, and also it is bringing in contaminants into that drainage system as well, much of which then do subsequently find their way into the water table, whether that's hydrocarbons and rubbers and plastics from roads and so on and so forth, or other chemicals that are in the surfaces. A couple of points down the bottom of the slide. So again, I mentioned at the start of this slide that the 1.5 degrees warming was crossed last year, but again, it doesn't obviously land evenly, and within our built environments and our cities, we have what we call the urban heat island effect. So the inner city will be warmer than a rural area, and that also leads to two things to do with water. Firstly, obviously, when we're warmer, we need more water. But secondly, again, the atmosphere around our cities are capable of holding more water because of that warmer air. So we get the kind of double whammy, if you like, in our built environment, that we're actually creating a hotter, wetter environment, and then worsening our ability to cater with it. Again, the previous speaker spoke about things to do with NFD in the future, and biodiversity. Obviously, natural habitats are also part of this same equation. So before we kind of zoom in as to what this might mean for us in terms of the solutions and products that we've got to try and address and mitigate some of those points, there's a regulatory framework as well as the actual climate and the actual weather, if you like, that is also trying to give us a nudge in that direction. So again, I'll just take a couple of moments to walk through each of these. So the Floods and Water Management Act, and specifically Schedule 3, is now finally being enacted in England. It's been in place in Wales for some time. Rather disappointingly, and a sorry indictment for the rate of UK legislative adoption. You can see on the right-hand side that the actual Act was originally passed in 2010, but still not really been fully implemented. And that's going to have a further push on what are known as SUDS solutions, which Jason will talk more about in his section. On water stress, increasingly we recognise that in our homes we need to reduce the amount of water that we consume per person. Clearly there are behavioural aspects to that, but actually there are also going to be regulatory tailwinds, which clearly provide innovation opportunities for us in terms of the products and solutions that we can supply that actually mean that our houses require structurally less water to run them than was the case in the past. 125 litres per person today is around the average today, and clearly a number below 100 litres per person per day is going to be at some stage the level we need to operate at in the future, which, by the way, is both technologically very possible and also in terms of its impact on our homes and lives is negligible. So it's actually something that's relatively easy to do. There's a regulatory aspect that, as I said, that overarches those 2 points. There's also the planning and interaction with water utilities and the way that that's increasingly impacting on our ability to build new homes, right? Those homes in water-stressed areas of the UK are increasingly required to actually put in mitigation points in their planning and design applications so that the utilities will actually adopt those homes. And last but not least, as those increasingly frequent and increasingly severe storm and rainwater effects happen, then clearly it's creating space for innovation and new thinking, both for manufacturers like ourselves, but also our customers, whether that's local planners and architects or landscape architects or water utility companies or indeed housing developers, where actually the problems of the future are not going to be solved by the products of yesterday. And so that innovation context is becoming increasingly important to us. So as I said, the thread of my few slides was just to give you a bit of a macro backdrop, a bit of the context of how the water and climate issues are impacting the built environment, some of the drivers that are creating a need for change for people like us at Genuit. And now I'll hand over in a moment to Jason, who will take you through what that really means for us.
While our tech team seamlessly transfers to the second part of our double act from Genuit, let me introduce the second speaker from that organisation. So we've got Jason Shingleton. He's Genuit's Group Material Science and Innovation Director. Very exciting job title there. And Jason spent most of his career developing products that either address the consequences of climate change or help us to mitigate some of the driving forces of it. And we're absolutely delighted that he's going to be joining us today to share some of those insights and solutions.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm just trying to unmute the microphone. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Kate. And thank you, Martin, for giving me such a good introduction. What I wanted to do for the next sort of 10 minutes, really, is just to share with you a little bit about how Genuit has developed solutions which are driving some of our growth in the water management part of our business. And those innovations which are predominantly linked to addressing the consequences of climate change in the built environment. One of the things that we're increasingly seeing as a result of the challenges from climate change, particularly around flooding historically, but more latterly around clean water and the lack of clean potable water to developments, is increasing regulation from governments, and those regulations have been sort of changing over time. And what we've been doing is looking at those and trying to come up with innovative ways to help our customers deal with those regulations and comply with those regulations. And what we've seen is that those regulations and the design approaches that result from them are constantly evolving. And what that means is that we constantly have to evolve in the solutions that we provide, which is exciting because it gives us an opportunity to innovate. And what I'm going to do is take you through a little bit of that history, if you like, for Genuit, in order to hopefully show you how that plays out and where the growth opportunities still are and have been and still are for us as a company as a result of the innovations that we're taking. what I want to do, if I can, is start with a few slides and talk around innovation in the context of water management. Because early doors, and more so recently, what we're seeing is this need for the switch towards resilience and adaptation, partly because there is a growing concern that we won't be able to limit ourselves to 1.5 degrees C. I think, as Claire said earlier on, we've already seen that last year. And if we're not going to limit ourselves to 1.5 degrees C, then we have to be prepared for the consequences of that, which means that our drainage systems need to be more resilient. This is not necessarily new. So, governments did recognise this many years ago. And in fact, in 2002, which is over 20 years ago, the UK government changed the building regulations in the UK. And what they did was to actually change the hierarchy of drainage. Before 2002, we used to drain our developments by putting pipe systems in and moving water from those developments as quickly as possible into a watercourse. We recognised that that wasn't sustainable, and so what happened is the hierarchy changed to mean that we got to look at harvesting the water first. Then we might want to use a soakaway, which allows water to go into the ground and resupplies natural aquifers from where we abstract water. After that, if we can't soak away, we need to look at attenuating water, which is basically intercepting it and capturing those peak flow events that Martin was talking about from the urban environment. And then managing the rate at which water flows out of those structures so that they flow into the river at a much more controlled rate and prevents river flooding. And only after you've been through that hierarchy can we look at really discharging through drainage systems in the way that we have before. And the benefit of that for us is that crystallised new markets for ways in which water could be harvested, stored and reused within the built environment. And that's led to some of the growth in Genuit in WMS. But it's not just all been regulation. Designers are increasingly changing the way in which they build in resilience to our drainage systems. So 20 years ago, when we first started looking at water management solutions, it was typical for us to design for a flood event of 1 in 100-year occurrence. Over the years, it's been realised that climate change is progressing at a pace where that will no longer be sustainable. And so we now might design an attenuation system, a storage system, to take a 1 in 100-year event plus a 40% allowance for climate change. And so what that's done is it's made the infrastructure that we're using to manage water bigger, and so accordingly it's driven some growth in the market. The other aspect that has been touched on is pollution, because one of the challenges of our drainage systems is they were designed for a different climate than that which we have today. So our sewer systems, particularly combined sewers, and I'm sure you've all seen a lot of the coverage in the press recently and the work of activists who are pushing the government to do something about the quality of our rivers with foul water discharges increasingly occurring. And this is really driven by the fact that our combined sewers, particularly in places like London, were not designed for the capacity that they require today. And when we get these big storm events, as a combined sewer, the excess rainwater flushes all of the wastewater out, and that ultimately leads to a river spill and pollution of the watercourses, which then makes them less clean for amenity. We had the reference to the boat race, but also it means we have challenges in terms of cleaning that water up when we want to extract it for drinking water. So we're increasingly seeing people asking about what kinds of solutions can we deploy for combined sewer outfalls, and part of that is about, again, water interception. The sort of size of some of the combined sewer stuff is important. You're seeing that with some of the big infrastructure now. You may be familiar with the Thames Tideway Tunnel, which is the big sewer scheme looking at trying to remove wastewater from the Thames. And we are going to see more of that kind of infrastructure required, because unless we intercept water, the only way we can deal with it really is to build bigger and bigger sewers to deal with that excess capacity. But it's not just in surface water. More recently, we've seen attention switch from government onto clean water and looking at tightening of the regulations, the building regulations about how much water can be used in those buildings and designing them to get the per capita consumption per day down from 125 litres now down to below 100 litres, even below 90 litres in water stressed areas. We've seen innovations like grey water potentially having to be used to supplement clean water, so ways in which we can use that for flushing toilets. And also we're seeing things like talk around actually water grids, so actually moving clean water from different parts of the country where it's abundant into parts of the country where it's scarce. So that's the kind of opportunities for innovation that we're seeing as a result of some of the dynamics that Martin presented. I'm now conscious of time. I'm going to take you quickly through some of the solutions just to show you a little bit of scale and a little bit of insight as to how they're deployed. So here we've got on the top left a scheme we did in London. It was part of something Thames Water did called Green Streets. The houses on either side of this road were being flooded when there was big sewage spills as a result of high intensity rainfall. So we looked at ways in which we could retrofit storage underneath the road and take the surface water out of the sewer and thereby eventually giving it extra sewer capacity for those houses to prevent combined sewer flooding. And that was very successful. We're now starting to see more projects like that being deployed. And I think that's an area where stormwater management market is growing, this element of retrofit and disconnection of surface water, because it mitigates the big infrastructure spends that might be required otherwise. Top right, you've got our more historical product called Polystorm that we developed in response to the 2002 building regulation change. And Polystorm is a modular water storage system. It's bifunctional in that if you wrap those modules, you can see there in a geotextile, you can allow the water to soak away. And if you wrap them in an impermeable membrane, you can store the water and then put a flow control throttle on the outlet and control the rate at which water discharges. We see Polystorm predominantly used in housing developments because it's very modular, so it can be deployed very locally and very easily. And you can connect different tanks together to spread them out across a development. Bottom of the slide, you can see the Gisbourne XL, which is the large attenuation systems made from pipes. And they're made for the big volume water storage to protect infrastructure. The chambers you can see there can contain treatment devices such as hydrodynamic separators to prevent silt being discharged into the watercourses. And with the silt often is where a lot of the pollutants go. So that's a little bit about these sort of attenuation type systems. More recently, we've seen the growth of green infrastructure, and this is where we're looking at solutions for the inner city areas where we've got this urbanisation, this concretisation that Martin's talked about, and how we can make those systems multifunctional so that they create green spaces, which helps with the habitat and biodiversity loss. So here you can see a permavoid system with an innovation which is called a wicking capillary cone, so that the water that's stored in the system can wick up into the soils above and thereby irrigate the trees and the plants. The trees provide shade, which provides cooling. The plants evaporate, evapotranspiration, which reduces the amount of water in the tank that needs to be attenuated. And the water can be controlled and reused in that environment. And that's the sort of latest way in the urban environment that we're trying to use water to create places, but also get multifunctional benefit. Very quickly, a couple of how those schemes look, as I showed you a pictorial. So here's Walthamstow Stadium, where we use permavoid to prevent water from running off into the River Lee excessively and causing flooding. You can see on the right how that scheme is landscaped and provides a much more natural environment. And then another one very quickly in Amsterdam, which is Orley Plain. So a very grey bus depot outside the station, was turned into a nice green water park with planting, vegetation, again, all passively irrigated from Belaith and with the habitat creation. So a little bit of an example there. Looking to the future, more recently, we are starting to think about how smart solutions can be deployed. So this is an example of a roof we did in Manchester. This roof has an ability, a computer attached to it with valves which are automatically controlled. And what we're able to do is now look at weather events and when the storm events are likely to occur. And that's important because then we can discharge the water from the tank before the relevant event gets there, which increases the capacity of the tank. We can decide how long to keep the water to irrigate the roofs above. And more often we're being asked now by cities, could we link these tanks so that a smart network of drainage solutions can be developed with each tank sort of deploying at the appropriate time to protect the sewers from flooding. And so that's still early days on some of that in development, but we certainly start to see more interest in this solution, which we call polysync. So I'm conscious I'm a little bit over time, but hopefully that's given you a feel for how Genuit is deploying its innovation and its solutions, and how climate change continues to challenge us as innovators when it comes to drainage, and how that will continue because of the progressive nature of climate change. So thank you very much.